Ladies and gentlemen, I am Joseph Potter, and welcome to the Evolution Network. With me today is Chris Ransom, and we've got some news that I just happened to stumble upon. Peyton Manning is in here, and he is doing some things that we could only speculate on because we've got some rumors that he has been looking into the Titans front office job to run football operations there, to run football operations with the Los Angeles Rams, and to run football operations with the Cleveland Browns at the president's position, which has sat vacant for almost 2 years. So, Chris, what do you have to say about this situation? Peyton Manning possibly back in the NFL by 2018.
I think it definitely is a shot of happening. Now, I'm going to take the Titans out of this conversation because I think that's all speculation. John Robertson, who took over as general manager after Mariota's rookie year, after he was an assistant in Tampa Bay, he has done a phenomenal job fixing that team. They got Conklin. They made that trade where they moved out of the #1 spot for Goff. They got Conklin. They got Derrick Henry. They picked up a ton of assets. They picked up Kevin Byard in that trade. Even though I hated the Kevin Byard pick at the time, he did step up a few weeks ago with the interceptions against your Browns. So I can't really trash the Kevin Byard pick now. So John Robinson has made a ton of brilliant decisions since taking over with the Titans and has really put that team back on the map. So I'm eliminating Peyton Manning as a GM. Now, they might make him a director of football operations and just have Robinson focus on the scouting and the draft stuff, which in that case, that would be a brilliant business decision. But I don't think John Robinson's job is in any jeopardy at this point, considering all the success he's had as the Titans general manager. Plus, he'll be entering his 3rd year. So that leaves us with the Rams and the Browns. Now, the Rams, they have needed to fire Les Snead for quite some time. However, they're 5-2 and they're winning games and they're taking care of business. So if they keep winning and they get a wild card spot, Les Snead's going to keep his job as well, which really leaves the Cleveland Browns as the ultimate front runner and overwhelming favorite to get Peyton Manning because the owner, Haslam, went to Tennessee, which is my father's alma mater. He graduated from there. He was also at the 1968 World's Fair, which was in Tennessee, but that's another story for a different day. The bottom line is these guys, Haslam and Manning, they both know each other from their days at Tennessee. They're both personal friends. Haslam worked with the Steelers for many years before buying the Browns. So these guys know each other, and there's a certain sense of rapport there. So I would think that would be the most logical fit of these three. But again, this is all speculation.
Yeah, and here's the thing with the Browns situation. Peyton Manning he never had a cannon for an arm. He had a good arm, not a cannon. Never had the perfect spiral. Was not always the most accurate, but Peyton Manning was the most prepared. Peyton Manning was a guy who can teach these, because let's face it, the Browns got the youngest roster in the NFL by far at this time. And the situation with that is he could teach them how to prepare. If he brings that prepared nature to a front office position, whether it's with the Browns or somebody else, you got all these football minds in a room, all these scouts in a room, the analytics departments in a room. Peyton Manning is, no matter what else you say about him, goofy personality, how awkward he can be socially, so on and so forth, the guy's mind is like a walking supercomputer. He can take all this information, put it together, and use it. And with back applying this to the Browns, then you have all these analytics guys. Then you have Hugh Jackson and the guys on the coaching staff. You have all this massive amount of information and numbers that are coming in. Peyton Manning can make use of these numbers. Peyton Manning is the equivalent, the closest thing you will find probably in professional sports to a supercomputer as far as his mental ability to process information. So getting him and putting him in a situation with a bunch of young guys and getting him to say that help them prepare, help a front office that, let's face it, Sashi Brown was an up and coming front office guy. He's a smart guy, I think at Harvard graduate, is really intelligent. Now you get Peyton Manning over him. Peyton Manning running the entire ordeal from a
and the resume that he's done excellent work at the Manning Academy. He took over that for his father, and here's a resume of what players have attended the Peyton Manning Passing Academy over the years. It's the Manning Academy where Eli and Peyton co-run the show now with Archie, but Archie founded the academy. But here's a list: Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Andrew Luck, Sam Bradford, Matthew Stafford, Jamarcus Russell were all as campers. They all took mentorship under Peyton Manning at the Manning Academy. Other quarterbacks that also attended include Nick Foles, Austin Davis, Sean Mannion, Case Keenum, and even backups like Luke McCown, Ryan Griffin, and Garrett Grayson have all attended the Manning Passing Academy. So that resume is unrivaled. It speaks for itself.
Yeah, could you imagine Peyton Manning with just the academy, not to mention the other stuff I mentioned, going to the Rams, going to the Browns? You have Jared Goff, you got Deshaun Kaiser, you got these young guys. Kaiser's the youngest quarterback in the NFL. 21 years old. That tells you right there, 21-year-old quarterback, extremely smart guy. That's something you can mold. That is moldable clay. Jared Goff, second year in the NFL this year, playing well now. That's something you can mold. You imagine him going to one of these teams, or even Tennessee, if he managed to get in there, even though I don't think it'll happen.
Yeah, if he got there, he wouldn't just be molding Mariota, because Mariota's a great product. He'd be harnessing Mariota. There'd be a different context, because Mariota's already shown he can make those leaps without Peyton. But if you give him Peyton, he goes from molding his potential to harnessing it. And that could be what makes Mariota the better QB than Winston down the road.
Yeah, it's like right now, it's like if things between these three franchises go, and whoever Peyton Manning chooses, that could literally shape the careers of whatever quarterback he works with. And that is extremely important, especially right now.
I just imagine Peyton Manning into Professor Oak's lab, and he's asking himself, do I want to mold Goff? Do I want to mold Kaiser? Do I want to mold harness Mariota? He's walking into Oak's lab, and he's trying to pick which quarterback he wants to get the most out of.
Yeah, it's like he'll be walking, because we know he's already visited Cleveland. 2 weeks ago, he was in Cleveland asking around about the feel of the city, about the feel of the front office, the locker room, how everything was going. He was talking to the Haslams. So, I mean, he's already visited Cleveland. I haven't gotten reports from Tennessee or Los Angeles as of yet, but I'm pretty sure he's been to Tennessee at some point, considering that he still lives there.
Jurkovec has visited Cleveland, and he actually worked out with the team. Now, Jurkovec's a high school senior, but they let him work out with the team, and he did well against the third team after, the Browns' practice officially ended during the summer. They let him work out with the team, even though he's a high school senior, and he felt so confident that he wanted the first team. And then he threw a touchdown on Joe Hayden and picked him apart in coverage. And that may have played into the Browns releasing Hayden as well. That's another story for another day. But my point is, this quarterback who was going to Notre Dame was so assertive that he actually dared the Browns to put their first team out and threw a touchdown on their first team defense, even though he's a senior in high school. I don't know if he got lucky, but yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, and I know, and while I would love to sit here and talk about the speculation with Peyton Manning all day, we do have some other news stories that are pretty noteworthy. And the big one here, I believe, is the injury to 49ers left tackle Joe Staley,
Yeah.
which a broken orbital bone in his eye. That is absolutely devastating. An orbital bone, that is almost always surgical procedure to get it back into place, because that's what a lot of people don't know. That's literally what keeps your eyeball in place. So, I mean, if depending on the severity of the break, that could be a devastating injury for anybody.
Absolutely. That he wasn't the only player to get injured in that game. Jimmy Smith broke his forearm. Jimmy Ward, the safety for the 49ers, he broke his forearm. He did not return to the game. So they both left that game injured. And Jalen Mills got a pick six, and that was the play Staley broke his orbital. They believe it was due to a block or a hit by Fletcher Cox. So that's something to keep an eye on. So those two injuries with Jimmy Ward and Joe Staley were probably the two biggest injuries this weekend. And it's pretty ironic that this comes place at the week after Jason Peters tore his ACL on Monday Night Football. So both left tackles for the 49ers and Eagles were pretty banged up. I mean, Peters tore his ACL versus Washington. We didn't get to that on my podcast or the Evolution Network. So I felt like we had to acknowledge that quickly. And Carson Wentz just looks suspect with Vaitai in there at left tackle. So, and then you look at what kind of output the 49ers are going to have without Staley. Well, TJ Betthart's basically going to become the modern day David Carr now if Staley misses any extensive time.
Yeah, and thankfully for Joe Staley, it looks like the break to his orbital bone wasn't that severe. I know I put the most extreme circumstance for a broken orbital bone into the equation here, but from what a couple guys from ESPN were saying, some other reporters, Staley seemed to be in good vibrations. He had some, nobody was killing his vibe. So he was good buzz, as I like to say. He had a good buzz. Nobody's killing his buzz. He is in good spirits. So that's good.
Won this game 33-10. They took a 20-0 lead. Jalen Mills was the key player with his pick six, and with Staley going down on that play, Niners 0-8, Eagles 7-1. I'm pretty certain there's nothing else worthy of mentioning in this game, so we can move on to the next game. One game.
Not really. People, I realize we're going to be going out of order a little bit here because of this. There's just a little bit of news. It's all noteworthy. Carson Wentz did not have his greatest game without Peters, so we'll see how well that goes, but he still threw 2 touchdowns.
And really the only team that can stop the Eagles from claiming the NFC East is the Cowboys, and we're not going to get to them now. We'll get to them at the end of the show. We'll get
to them a little later. To start off with the scores and a few highlights. Baltimore quarterback Joe Flacco was dazed. He was bleeding. He had stitches in his ear. I haven't gotten any word on
possible concussions, but didn't look that dirty when he hit Flacco. But the Ravens were so frustrated that one of the offensive linemen literally pushed Alonso to the ground. They were so furious. They basically Hulk smashed Kiko Alonso. And then
because he's the only thing they have left on offense. I mean, the entire offense might as well be a nice freaking episode of The Walking Dead at this point. But either way, the Ravens win 40-0. Flacco.
Mosley and Jimmy Smith had pick sixes. Flacco got injured, and this game pretty much sucked. It would get a 1-star review on Yelp. That's how brutal this game was. Let's move on.
Yeah, and next game we have a little bit more news. The Vikings beat the Browns 33-16. Browns led at halftime 13-12. Led again 16-15 in the third quarter before the Browns made some bad mistakes. 2 penalties in the end zone, which set up Vikings' 2 2 Vikings touchdowns, which put the game out of reach. DeShone Kizer played much better, and it's like I was telling you before we went on. You could see it closely. When the moment Kizer realized this is how you win in the NFL, it's because Hugh Jackson had him dinking and dunking, and everybody's like, oh, he's just now they're turning him into a game manager. He's not doing anything. He's just thinking off to his playmakers, yada, yada, yada. Then you could see it. The defenses, which were playing back the entire first half of the first quarter, came in. They threw a quick fade to Njoku. Now, the pass was overthrown, but here's the thing. You could look at Kizer. You could see in his face, he was shocked that it was open. It's like he didn't get that you don't have to force things in and throw through a brick wall to get what you want. You can just sit there, dink and dunk, and then when they come up, you can throw over the top. He was trying to throw a guy open that was already open because he was not used to, oh, you mean if I just pull in the defense in a West Coast offense, I can throw over the top? Yeah.
Kizer might not break out until 2019 because I think the Browns have to build a similar offense to what the Cowboys did. You take Saquon Barkley at whatever pick you get, and you make Kizer the game manager like the Cowboys did with Elliott and Prescott. That worked, but Prescott was 23 when he started because his birthday is July 29th, 1993. Kizer is 21. So Kizer could mold him to a game manager like Prescott, but we may not see results until 2019. And that's assuming the Browns are patient and they don't find a way to screw this up.
Yeah, and 2018, 2019 at the latest, give them 2-3 years, but the fact that you could actually see the 21-year-old basically saying, oh, this works. And the rest of the game, he made some very nice downfield throws after that. He had a 12-yard strike to Triggs on a very good timing route for an end. He had a very nice pass to Ricardo Lewis.
The turning point
the end of the second quarter
where when they take ownership. And I can't stress this enough. The turning point for most quarterbacks in their career is when they take ownership. Derek Carr avoided turnovers, played good football his rookie year, but the Raiders started 0-13. And there was all this speculation they'd draft Winston or Mariota at 1 and give up on Carr after his first year. He finally wins a game, and the Raiders start getting confident in themselves, and he takes off just like that after that moment. So
yeah, and it's these moments, though, he realized, oh, I can hit timing routes, and, I'm good at that. I can do this. Oh, all I have to do is draw in the defense, and then I can basically get whatever I want to deep, and then when they go deep, I can get whatever I want to short. Or, it's these little things, and you could see a couple of them. Once one falls into place for a young quarterback, then it makes the game easier, and the rest fall into place. So that's what I'm looking for with Kizer. This fell into place. So now let's see what else falls into place because he has mentioned that his confidence has been damaged by the losing at Notre Dame, by being benched, by the losing at Cleveland. And we'll see if this clicking of this little piece of information brings him back up. Now, his accuracy does still need work, as we all know, but a few drop passes – if the Browns get a wide receiver to help him build that confidence, if they get Peyton Manning, and there's speculation that they could reach out to Peyton Manning during the bye week for that president's position, which would include potentially ownership stake in the Browns.
Is the Browns bye week in week 9, or do they play the Jaguars and then they have the bye week in week 10?
It's this week. This is the bye week, this upcoming week. So we could be seeing a lot of moving and shaking, and the Browns, not because Ian Rappaport stated that right now Hugh Jackson is safe. Even this offseason, as of right now, he is safe, but the front office could make a move. This could be that move that they're talking about, and it could come sooner rather than later. So these are some things to keep for this. The Browns have to be the most interesting 0-8 team I have ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
But they're
0-8. They're playing like a 2 or 3 win team. They have 2 to 3 win talent, but they're 0-8 because of mistakes.
And they're keeping themselves in the news like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're keeping themselves relevant.
So Hugh Jackson's now 1-23 with Cleveland. He still has his job. He's not in any jeopardy like some are speculating. And this is an interesting situation here with this Browns team because if Kaiser plays like he did this week and Bortles has a screw-up game, because Bortles can have good games and he can have games where he just commits multiple turnovers. If the Browns catch Bortles napping and Kaiser plays like this, they can beat the Jaguars. As crazy as it sounds, that's the truth. But moving on to the Vikings, players that stood out for the Vikings in this game, left tackle Riley Reiff and right end Everson Griffin. The biggest reason those guys stood out is due to the absence of Joe Thomas and Myles Garrett. I think there's no arguing with that. And
I also want to point out that a lot of people were wondering, are they going to make a move in the bye week on the left tackle? The Browns are going to make a bye week for Greco in that first half. Whether you like it or whether you don't like it, held Everson Griffin in check that entire first half. So, it's not like Greco is a pushover. He's a strong guy, and that also helped that, as we know, Adam Thiessen from Minnesota had a great game, 5 receptions, 98 yards and a touchdown. Isaiah Crowell had his best game of the year, 11 carries, 64 yards and a touchdown, to go along with a beautiful broken play shovel pass from DeShone Kizer to ramble for about 30-something yards. So Greco may be somebody who is, just for the fact that he's as strong as an ox, is going to be able to help facilitate that running game in Cleveland. And Adam Thielen.
There's even talks that Drango might get a shot at left tackle if Greco.
Drango. Did I say Greco? I meant Drango.
Wait, Spencer Drango was warming up at left tackle.
He played left tackle, Spencer Drango.
Because he warmed up as if he was going to play left tackle, and I think they said
he did play left tackle. He started left tackle.
That's what I saw in the news. I saw Drango warming up. Like, I know when I was watching the game on NFL Network, they said Spencer Drango would make his first start of the year at left tackle, and we both loved him coming out of Baylor.
Yeah, so it's like I'm hoping, because last year he played guard. He had slower foot speed, but he's been working a lot with Joe Thomas. He was working a lot with Joe Thomas as a rookie, working a lot with Joe Thomas now. So maybe some of that, he was able to get a little bit of that to rub off on him, and that work ethic worked. Either way, Vikings win 33-16 with a great game from Thiessen and
Riley
Reiff.
Yeah, he's gone he's outside of Joe Thomas. Reiff is the only offensive tackle in the NFL that went over 150 snaps this season without a sack allowed.
Yeah, so, I mean,
doesn't matter who's at quarterback for the Vikings. As long as Reiff is playing, the Vikings have a chance.
Yeah, so there are a lot of stories that came out of this game. As we said, the Browns are the most interesting 0-8 team I've ever seen in my life. They keep themselves in the news. The Vikings, 6-2, are in the driver's seat right now.
Yeah, they have the Lions and Packers on the road, but as long as those teams keep losing, because the Lions are 3-4, the Packers are 4-3 without Aaron Rodgers, the Vikings, they might end up losing to the Lions and Packers, but right now they are in the driver's seat. And as long as they win one of those two games, they should come out of the NFC North in first place.
Yeah, and moving on, the Bills beat the Raiders 34-14. The Bills are now 5-2, 4-0 at home. The Raiders fall to 3-5, 1-3 away.
All
Derek
right,
Carr
two notable
31
highlights from this game.
9.
LaShawn McCoy had 151 rushing yards on 27 carries along with a rushing touchdown, and Matt Milano had a 40-yard fumble recovery that put a smile on Grace's face. And the Bills won 34-14.
Yeah.
It was a 40-yard fumble recovery for a touchdown, so it was a big play for Buffalo. Changed the momentum and dynamic of that game entirely.
Yeah, putting a smile on Grace's face. Okay, we'll give it that. She deserves to smile a little bit. So, moving on, we
move on to the Tampa Bay game because another player did well. Luke Kuechly, he was another Boston College graduate that really stepped up. Had 8 total tackles, 2 assisted, 6 solo, a tackle for a loss, a deflection for a pass breakup, an interception, and a fumble recovery. So he pretty much did everything for Carolina in their 17-3 win over Tampa Bay, where Tampa Bay's offense, their defense showed up despite Brent Grimes being inactive, but their offense was completely stagnant in this game.
Yeah, and this is easily the most disappointing game of the week.
This was going to be our featured game. Like heading into the predictions, heading into July, I marked this down as the featured game of the week, but it ended up being a bigger letdown than what. Go ahead, fill in the blank here.
Yeah, I was going to have it a featured game as well. This was a bigger letdown than a trip to the Bunny Ranch. So, I mean, this is one of those games. Jameis Winston, 21 for 38. 21. He was averaging 10 yards a pass or something like that. He had 210 yards, 2 interceptions. Cameron Brate was, who I love, 4 receptions, 64 yards, tight end, led the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in receiving. The Buccaneers only scored 3 points. The Buccaneers easily right now the most disappointing team in the NFL.
Yeah, we picked this team to get home field in the NFC at 12-4 back in July, and they're 2-5. They're currently in last place. They're 3 games out, but they could get back to 500. They won't make the playoffs, but their next 3 games are against the Saints on the road, the Jets, and the Dolphins. And if they can beat the red-hot Saints and end their winning streak, they have a shot of returning to 500. Does that mean they're going to make the playoffs? Hell no. They're 3 games out of this division. This division's a war of attrition right now, and the other teams are stepping up while Tampa Bay isn't. So that really puts Tampa Bay in a situation where their back is against the wall. And Tony's telling me this is a 6-10 team at best. I should listen to him, but I picked the Buccaneers to sweep the Saints and the Panthers in the preseason, so I still have hope that this team can go 9-7, but I don't think it's enough for a wild card at this point with how the Rams benefit from the Cardinals not having Carson Palmer, and with the Washington Redskins or Dallas Cowboys probably getting that other wild card. Who knows?
Yeah, and as we predicted the Buccaneers and Cowboys to be the top 2 teams. We'll get to the Cowboys here in a bit because, as we know, as we were talking about yesterday, this has been one of the weirder NFL years that we can remember. So moving on, we've got another surprise. Well, yeah, we got another surprise team, the Bengals, which it's a surprise team because of the fact that they only have 3 wins. We expected better from them.
I expected them to be 2-5. I actually thought they might be worse, but they've been.
Well, so I expected better from them. You, on the other hand,
I thought they would be like a punching bag. Like I thought they would be the Jeffrey Ross of the NFL. They would tell good jokes at roasts, but they would be the team that gets roasted. So I
expected more from their running game. Joe Mixon and Jeremy Hill. I expected Giovanni Bernard. I expected them to have more than a combined 17 carries for 37 yards and no touchdowns. Because
their offensive line is terrible. That's the thing. And Joe Mixon's terrible in pass protection. If you watch his Oklahoma tape, he gave up a ton of sacks and pass protection. So that's the thing with Mixon. Yeah. And I value pass protection and vision more than speed, which is why I get a lot of crap as a scout. I get a lot of crap for that. But we'll see. Mixon's got to fix that. They got to fix the offensive line before he takes off. I'm not saying he can't take off, but they've got to fix the offensive line first before he does take off. And they're going to have to do that in free agency in the draft. So the Bengals, this was a pretty pedestrian game. And the only thing I'm going to point out is Carlos Dunlap's pick six was a return for a touchdown. It put the Bengals over the top. Andy Dalton avoided turnovers on his 30th birthday. This might be the peak for Dalton this year. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to move on here. Bengals win 24-23 to move to 3-4, where the Colts fall to 2-6.
And they're challenging Tampa Bay for the rights to a top 5 draft pick, as they were my preseason pick to win the AFC South. But they have been disappointing. That's mainly due to Luck being injured. This is going to be – there's probably going to be a 2-5 team that makes a huge leap to the playoffs next year. It's either going to be Tampa Bay or it's going to be the Colts, just based on what we're seeing. Because if the Colts can stay healthy and they get a new coach, they can field a playoff team. Same with Tampa Bay. If they can actually execute, they could field a playoff team next year as well. So look for the Colts or the Buccaneers to make a huge leap next year.
And we move on to Barnum and Brady as the Patriots win 21-13 as Barnum and Brady's circus rolled over the Chargers.
You're really going to insert Ringling Brothers jokes when it comes to the greatest quarterback in the NFL. I'm disgusted by that, quite frankly. Now, Melvin Gordon had an 87-yard rushing touchdown to help my fantasy team, even though the Chargers took the early lead. They led for the entire first quarter. Brady tied it with a Gronkowski touchdown. Benjamin muffed a punt in the end zone. And that's really what changed the momentum and dynamic of this game, because the Chargers were playing excellent football up until that point, and it really looked like they had the Patriots on the edge of their seats. And then Benjamin muffs the fumble. That turns into a safety. Patriots get a field goal on the after the safety when they get the ball back. So that's 5 points. Careless 5 points they gave up to make it 12-7. Gostkowski had a field goal before halftime, and time of possession was huge for New England as well. New England had the ball for 10 minutes and 17 seconds in the second quarter. They had the ball for 8 minutes and 25 seconds in the third quarter, which allowed them to gain an 18-7 lead, and they had the ball for 10 minutes and 22 seconds in the fourth quarter. So for every quarter after the first quarter, the Patriots had the ball for at least 8 minutes and 25 seconds, and they had the ball for 10 minutes in the second and fourth quarter. So time of possession, Tom Brady managing the game well with 333 passing yards, 1 touchdown, no interception. It wasn't his best game, but he did just enough for them to win, played smart, avoided turnovers, and the Patriots controlled the time of possession. When the Patriots have the ball for 10 minutes and a quarter, for 3 quarters, they're going to win, even if Tom Brady only throws 1 touchdown and doesn't have his best outing as far as touchdowns go.
Well, thank you for going that far, even though I think that Lisa will argue the best quarterback in the NFL right now. Point goes to Aaron Rodgers, even though he's injured. And I will take Lisa over you because she has a black belt and will kick your ass, and mine at the same time. So we will go with Aaron Rodgers on that, even with
Tom Brady's the best quarterback currently playing in the NFL. He's not the best quarterback on Madden, which is Rodgers. I will admit that. Even though Brady got the Madden cover and got a higher rating than Rodgers, I'll admit as a man that Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback in Madden and in fantasy leagues than Brady. However, Brady's got more Super Bowl rings than any quarterback, and leads the NFL in passing yards. So it's hard to argue against Brady at this point.
It's hard to argue against Lisa's foot going into somebody's face.
Or your butt.
So I will take Rodgers. And
I'll take Brady. I'm going to continue to put faith in this Patriots team that's now 6-2 thanks to Brady's heroics. The Chargers fall to 3-5. And they didn't have Hightower or Gilmore, and the defense still held the Chargers to 13 points, which is amazing when you consider that Hightower, he's out for the year now for the Patriots. So if my preseason prediction of the Patriots repeating does not become reality, it's due to Hightower being absent from the lineup. That's really the excuse I get to rely on.
Well, Happy Gilmore goes into the circus quite well, so saying that, we'll go ahead and move on. The Saints moved to 5-2 as they beat the Bears 20-12. Drew Brees finished the game 23 for 28, 299 yards, and Jordan Howard had another spectacular game, 23 carries, 102 yards.
But the real star of this game was Marshawn Lattimore. He had one deflection from a pass breakup, including the game-winning interception that traumatized Mitchell Trubisky at the end of this game. Plus, Zach Miller also suffered a season-ending injury. So there goes another weapon for the Bears.
Okay, yeah, of course. I know, and it killed my fantasy on that. Still whooped Kerm's ass, but still it killed my fantasy on that. Mitchell Trubisky.
We both whooped Kerm's ass in fantasy this week. I'm in Banel's league. I faced Kerm, and you beat Kerm in fantasy as well, which is pretty ironic.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. This all leads to one thing. The big story out of this game, whether anybody wants to admit it or not, was Mitchell Trubisky. For the first time this year, he threw an abundance of passes. They tried to put the game on his shoulders. It turned into an abysmal failure. Not only that interception, but his 14 of 32, 164 yards, 5.1 yard average, a QB rating of 36. Okay, this is what you and I were both talking about Trubisky. It's the same thing with Kaiser. These guys were not ready to play as rookies. Okay?
But they put him into the lineup. Even though Mike Glennon had that 4-turnover game, the Bears panicked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is something they shouldn't have put Kaiser in. We've stated this on many podcasts, both yours and mine. They shouldn't have put Trubisky in. Trubisky has further to go than Kaiser did. They've just been able to mask it with Jordan Howard, as great as a runner as he's been this year, which they couldn't do it this time. They got down too far, and they tried to put it on his shoulders.
100 yards, but they got down by too many points. I mean, 20-12. They only lost this game by 8 points, but Mark Ingram got a rushing touchdown late in the second quarter, which made it 14-3. And by that point, even though Howard still had 72 rushing yards and got to 100, by that point the Bears had to throw more, and that took them out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, and because he hasn't been doing that much, that means that his high quarterback rating goes straight down the toilet, and he's now at a 66.3 quarterback rating with 2 touchdowns and I believe 2 or 3 interceptions.
I believe the only 1 p.m. game left for us to recap is the one that's on the top of the site, which is Atlanta and the Jets. I believe that's the final 1 p.m. game on your show.
Okay. Yeah,
the Falcons won that 25-20. Matt Ryan went 18 for 29, 254 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, no interceptions, did well as a game manager, really connected with Julio Jones and with Mohamed Sanu, had 2 fumbles early in that game. And I started Josh McCown in fantasy against Kern because I had Goff, Eli Manning, and Bortles all on bye weeks. So I had to go out and get McCown a few weeks ago. I benched him versus the Patriots, which was a big mistake. But I started him this week, and I had Flacco, and I still managed to beat Kern. So that's amazing.
Yeah, and on a side note here, for the late games, we're going to go and skip down to Pittsburgh because it goes right into something I just read. By a slim margin, the Steelers are currently the most likely team to win the Super Bowl per FPI. They have a 0.2% better chance than the Chiefs.
And the reason the Steelers and Chiefs are favored over the Patriots, the Chiefs beat the Patriots head-to-head in Gillette Stadium, and the Steelers are just healthier. I thought Vince Williams was going to be a liability at middle linebacker, but he's played fantastic football. And the Patriots don't have Hightower right now. They don't have him or Edelman for the rest of the year. And that's why, as much as I love the Patriots, as much as I love this team, that is why Vegas is favoring the Steelers. I'm too stubborn to give up on my preseason prediction or change it, and I really can't when the Patriots are 6-2. So if the Patriots win, it's because if Patriots don't repeat, it's due to Hightower's absence and due to pure execution by this Steeler defense. Few takeaways from this game really quickly, because this is one of the featured games, and we could come back to it later, but let's just get it out of the way now because The Detroit Lions, takeaway number one, the Lions were 0 for 6 on third down conversions in the first half. They still had 12-10 at halftime. Takeaway number two, the Lions had the ball for 9 minutes and 28 seconds in the third quarter, and they still couldn't score. That is the biggest takeaway from this game. We'll probably both admit, because if you lead 12-10 at halftime, you get the ball to start the second half, and you have the ball for 9 minutes and 28 seconds, 9.5 minutes out of 15, you're expected to score on that drive. They didn't. Pittsburgh capitalized thanks to Juju Smith-Schuster, who had his best game of the year with 7 receptions, 193 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown. Ben Roethlisberger had some careless mistakes. Le'Veon Bell had a fumble. Antonio Brown was limited to 5 receptions for 70 receiving yards. And the other thing, which I didn't mention on the site, which was a pretty big storyline on Total Pro Sports on Facebook, was A'Shawn Robinson and Maurkice Pouncey unleashed some of that Alabama versus Florida SEC hatred and got ejected for getting into a fight with each other after a penalty. It wasn't on the NFL.com recaps PDF, which I try to read off of and highlight all the big plays for my site. So it wasn't on there, but Total Pro Sports found the fight. They found the brawl. And I figured that is worth mentioning. I don't know if they'll get suspended or not, but we'll see. They're probably both going to get fined. I don't think either one will get suspended, but I'm expecting Goodell to be writing up game checks, fining both players.
Well, Jim Caldwell, on whether A'Shawn Robinson will be available Monday night against Green Bay, said, I don't know that. And Jim Caldwell is a big disciplinarian these days. I mean, he was really lenient when he was with the Colts, and a lot of that had to do with Peyton Manning, because Peyton Manning basically ran that team. But in his second go-around, he does not condone this type of action. So A'Shawn Robinson might get suspended and fined by the team on top of what Goodell gives him. So that is something to watch for, because Jim Caldwell will not put up that type of.
And Elodie Nada is injured as well. So if the Lions don't have Ngata or A'Shawn Robinson, the Packers have a chance if their offensive tackles can protect Brett Hundley. But again, it comes down to Hundley's decision-making. I still think the Lions win that game now, but again, Hundley might pull the upset. Do not sleep on Brett Hundley with the Packers coming off a bye week.
Yeah, and so the Steelers win 20-15 to move to 6-2, 4-1 away, while the Lions fall to 3-4, 1-3 at home. Moving on to the Cowboys and Redskins.
The Steelers-Chiefs-Patriots race is literally going to be a decathlon at this point. Whoever loses last is going to be the team that ends up with home field, and none of the teams can take their foot off the pedal.
Indeed. The Cowboys win to move to 4-3, where the Redskins fall to 3-4, and Cowboys won 33-19. Kirk Cousins with another wonderful game, 26-39, 1 touchdown. But the big news, the big story is Mr. Ezekiel Elliott.
Ezekiel Elliott has been playing. Ezekiel Elliott has literally turned into the Human Torch from the Fantastic Four ever since he's been spared all these suspensions. He's just been on fire to the point where it's literally like watching the Human Torch score on opposing defenses.
Yeah, I saw some of this game, and they were just giving it to Elliott, and they basically said, Prescott, almost take a break. Well, you'll throw it when you have to, otherwise we're giving it to Elliott. Elliott, 33 carries, 150 yards.
He wants to do as much as he can. I'm sure the Elliott suspension is going to happen at some point this year or at some point next year if it carries over. However, he wants to do as much as he can for the Cowboys while he's playing, so they're just going to feed him the ball because he's fired up. 33 carries, 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. Ezekiel Elliott pretty much won this game for Dallas, and Mike Nugent missed a field goal that would have tied the game early, but Ezekiel Elliott really bailed him out, and then Washington got the ball to start the third quarter, but Tyrone Crawford forced a Kirk Cousins fumble. DeMarcus Lawrence recovered the fumble, and that fumble recovery set up a drive that made it 14-13 with Washington having the ball to 17-13 with Dallas extending the lead. Mike Nugent really balling out. Dallas had the ball for 9 minutes and 54 seconds in the third quarter, even though they could only get 3 field goals from Mike Nugent, who filled in for the absent Dan Bailey, who's dealing with an injury of his own. So, yeah, Mike Nugent balling like Ted Nugent. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we're gonna go on past that, and we're gonna say, look at the Seahawks Texans. Seahawks win 41-38 to move to 5-2, where the Texans fall to 3-4. But the big story here has to be the quarterbacks. Russell Wilson, 26 of 41, 452 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, sacked 2 times.
Both
while
quarterbacks hit over
Deshaun
400
Watson-
yards, but I couldn't put a photo of either quarterback on the site because both quarterbacks had turnovers in the game.
Well,
Russell Wilson
Deshaun
had
Watson
interception.
was
Watson
four
had
touch-
3
4
interceptions.
touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 5 sacks, 19 of 30, 402 yards, 8 rushes for 67 yards. Russell Wilson had 4 rushes for 30 yards.
My player of the game for this was Paul Richardson. He had 6 receptions, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns. Paul Richardson was huge in this game early on. And the other big story from this game is the Texans benched Chris Clark at left tackle for Julian Davenport because Dwan Brown refused to play during the anthem after Bob McNair's comments, which we may or may not have time to get to. But if Davenport plays like this at left tackle moving forward, the Texans are still very well in the thick of things in the AFC South because they're only 1 game out, and they still have to face the Titans. They'd own the tiebreaker over the Titans because they beat them in Week 4, and they could get revenge on the Jaguars in Jacksonville later this year. Just so the Texans are not out of this by any stretch of the imagination. They probably wouldn't win a wild card game due to all the defensive injuries, but they're still very well in the thick of things in the AFC South. You can't say the same about the Colts.
Yeah, and our final game is, I'm sure that
No, we
got
covered every game. I'm going through
No, we did cover the Eagles 49ers, didn't we?
Yeah, we opened up
we
the
did.
show with
Okay.
Eagles 49ers. We'll double check really quickly. Ravens Dolphins, check. Vikings Browns, check. Falcons Jets, we covered that before the late games, check. Panthers Buccaneers, we covered that, check. Eagles 49ers, we opened up with that game due to the Staley injury, check. Bears Saints, check. Patriots Chargers, check. Raiders Bills, LaShawn McCoy, check. Dunlap, check. Seattle, check. Ezekiel Elliott, hand gestures, discount double check that, like Aaron Rodgers. Steelers Lions, check. We covered every game. The only game we haven't covered tonight is the Broncos Chiefs game, which that's going to be a fun game to preview. And let's talk about the Bills really quickly because the Bills were a team that I thought they would get off to a good start and then they lose to the Raiders and the Jets in consecutive games. But the Bills actually have a real window of opportunity to make the playoffs because if they beat the Jets on Thursday night, they go from 5-2 to 6-2, and then they can prepare for the Chargers. And they get the Saints at home. I think they can beat the Saints at home. So we could honestly be looking at a 7-2 or 8-2 Bills team that collapses down the stretch but still finds a way to make the playoffs due to home wins over the Colts and the Dolphins in Week 15. So the Buffalo Bills could very well go 10-6 and get a wild card spot simply due to the weak strength of schedule. And that's what happened with the Dolphins last year. They weren't really a playoff team statistically from what they did, but they did just enough to win, and they won at the right time, and that's what got the Dolphins in the playoffs. So, and Joey's crumpling all of the Bills' playoff hopes because he thinks this is a boring topic, but it is fun to speculate on, in my opinion. You're evil. I understand you doing this to the Steelers or the Patriots, but don't crumple the Bills' playoff hopes. They've suffered for too long. Their playoff drought is longer than Cleveland's. You should be ashamed of yourself. Literally.
It's all crumpled. It's a twisted mess. So I can try to crumple it some more.
No, do not torture the Bills fans like this. They've suffered longer than the Browns. Kelly,
There's something else I can crumple.
Do you enjoy crumpling Bills fans' playoff hopes, Joey?
Oh, just wait till I get to the Patriots next year. It's
all right.
on.
On that note, we'll move on to college football because that was a good, brief, fun segment.
Yeah.
Joey crumpling the Bills' playoff hopes.
Yeah, it's right now in college football, we had upset, and we're going to get into the upsets here in a few minutes. Right now, we're going to go Stanford barely squeaked by Oregon State 15-14.
Yeah, Thomas Coburn was actually at that game. He's a huge Oregon State fan, and he lives in Oregon, so he actually attended that game, and that's what we opened up the podcast with. We actually opened up with that game because he attended it in person.
Yeah. Bird, the running back, I am not seeing any stats for him. Did he even play?
Bryce Love did not play. He was inactive.
Yeah, Love. I don't know why I was thinking Bird. I was thinking the Titans safety.
You were at Dos Gatos and you listened to Bird is the Word last night. We're going to go with that.
Oh, actually, I was at the Bay Street Bar and Grill and I had some chicken wings. But still, they were good chicken wings. But still, Bryce Love not playing. I think that was the big news there because he is a guy who is flying up the radar at this point.
Ryan Nall is a guy from Oregon State that's a late-round draft prospect. He fumbled a ball that gave Stanford a turnover and hope because Oregon State was controlling the tempo of that game without Bryce Love. So,
yeah, then we moved down. That was a Thursday night game. The Friday night game, Memphis destroyed Tulane to move to 7-1. Tulane falls to 3-5. Memphis, I'm not sure what their standing is now, but they're on here. They're ranked 24th. And Anthony Miller finished 6 receptions, 75 yards, 1 touchdown, his lowest output of the year, I believe. Riley Ferguson was 18 of 31, 298 yards, 3 touchdowns, got his stats, but didn't have his best game of the year either. So give credit to Tulane for stifling those 2 guys. Big upset of the day, upset of the week, probably upset of the year. Ohio State, who previously lost to Oklahoma when Oklahoma was number 3.
Yeah, I was watching the game at my friend's house because he hates Penn State. Him and his girlfriend both hate Penn State. So we were like, damn it. And then Ohio State came back and won at the end. It was like watching me during the Super Bowl coverage with the Patriots, and we all enjoy that.
Yeah, wasn't it Thomas that said that T.J. Barrett was not a draftable quarterback? Well, JT Barrett comes back.
Barrett could be a late-round pick if he gets a Senior Bowl invite. Yeah. He's not in my top 300 on FanSpeak, but he's had some notable games.
He's a draftable quarterback, and he was saying that he's not a draftable quarterback. Well, Barrett has 33 for 39, 328 yards, 4 touchdowns. Led the team in rushing as well with 17 rushes, 95 yards.
If Barrett gets a Senior Bowl invite, he becomes a day 3 pick like Dobbs. And if he doesn't, he probably goes undrafted. That's the thing with JT Barrett because he's never put together that 3,500-yard season that captivates scouts. He has the arm. He has the tools. He's a decent game manager, but scouts and coaches, they don't – it's like Josh Allen can keep having bad games. Darnold can keep having bad games. They're still considered first-round guys. Scouts are not really looking at JT Barrett, but if he gets a Senior Bowl invite, he could be a day 3 pick like Dobbs was.
Yeah, and we're going to go ahead and look at the – yeah, I know. I got excited there for a minute.
Yeah, I'm looking through the AP Top 25 at the moment, but I'm letting Joey read through the recaps first before I get to the top 25 because we like to build up suspense around playoff time and torture our audience the same way the NCAA Selection Committee likes to torture their viewers.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley, he didn't do much.
Ohio State's got a great defensive line, though. They've got Sam Hubbard, Tyquan Lewis, Nick Bosa, who also wears 97 like his brother. They've got Draymond Jones at defensive tackle. They've got Jerome Baker and Dante Booker at outside linebacker. So they have a good front 7. I'm not surprised that Ohio State's front 7 kept them in check.
Yeah, and they're going now. Saquon Barkley, 21 rushes, 42 yards. But moving on, we get the big news. Florida fires its head coach after losing to number 3 Georgia 42-7. Chris, go ahead, take this one away.
Florida, Jim McElwain just wasn't the answer. And like I said at the beginning, pre-show, I think we talked about it before we went on the air. We talked about how Georgia has built a monopoly in the SEC East similar to Alabama because they're recruiting better than Alabama right now. And with both Florida and Tennessee probably having vacant coaching positions, right now they have a grip hold on the SEC East long term, the same way Alabama's built a grip hold on the SEC West. So we're going to see more of this Mark Richt versus Nick Saban showdown in the coming years. And Kirby Smart, isn't Kirby Smart in Georgia now as the defensive coordinator? Because he was on Alabama, I think, at one point.
I believe so, but I don't keep as close tabs on that as you and Kerm do.
So, yeah, that's another thing. So we're looking at Alabama and Georgia as the two power teams right now, and they're probably going to anchor the top two, both at 8-0. And then after that, you've got a few unbeatens left. I think we're only down to 5 unbeatens in the FCS because South Florida lost to Houston. Tony Mario kept pointing out how Houston really got after the quarterback. And then you had 8 unbeatens in the FCS heading into this week, or FBS. But South Florida losing, Penn State losing, and TCU losing to Iowa State were the big upsets. So that leaves us with 5 unbeatens: Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and Georgia. Wisconsin, who's going to drift through to the Big Ten championship at 12-0. Miami Hurricanes, who are 7-0 at the moment, but they get 2 tough games against Virginia Tech and Notre Dame in back-to-back weeks. And then you've got Central Florida, who could potentially surge into the top 10 if they keep winning games because they're at number 15 in the AP top 25. And you've got a ton of teams like TCU, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, who are just going to kill each other. We're only going to see one of them get into the playoff, and that's assuming that team wins out. So Central Florida is going to benefit from the Big 12 killing each other. They might benefit from Virginia Tech if they beat Miami as well. So they could benefit from the ACC knocking each other out. So Central Florida might move into the top 10. They're not. I don't know if their resume is strong enough for them to qualify as a playoff team, but they might move into the top 10 if they keep winning games. Because I see the teams ranked ahead of them, and a lot of those teams are Big 12 teams. Iowa State has moved up to number 14. They jumped 11 spots after their upset over number 4 TCU, and they beat Oklahoma when they were in the top 5. So Iowa State is looking like a team that might make a run. TCU, Oklahoma State, you got a ton of Big Ten teams. You've got the 2 ACC coastal powerhouses, Miami and Virginia Tech, who are set to play next week. So we're going to see movement. Central Florida has a chance to move into the top 10, but you look at the top of this list: Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Wisconsin, and then you have a bunch of one-loss teams: Notre Dame, Clemson, Penn State, and Oklahoma, all battling for that final playoff spot. And I don't think Central Florida can do enough to jump those teams, even if they win out, because those teams have stronger resumes.
Well, speaking of Iowa State, the Iowa State Hawkeyes, powered by Kyle
the Iowa State Cyclones. The Hawkeyes are the Iowa. They wear black and
Steelers. My bad. I get the wrong Iowa team. I'm sure they'll come marching at my door if they can afford to come to Florida at some point. But they beat the number 4 TCU Horned Frog 14-7. Wisconsin, number 5, won 24-10 over Illinois. Clemson, number 7, won 24-10 over Georgia Tech. Miami, number 8, won 24-19 over North Carolina.
Could you imagine the outcry if we get Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Wisconsin as the 4 playoff teams, and the committee decides to award 2 SEC and 2 Big Ten teams due to close games in the championship? Yeah. Can you imagine how many people would be pissed off about that? Like, at that point, there literally would be talks about the college football playoff expanding to either 5 teams, 6 teams, or 8 teams. It's like, we need that.
Here's the thing. If that happens, they'll be happy for the days when Notre Dame was in there for 2 straight years losing, because Notre Dame, number 9, number 14, NC State, 35-14. They'll be moving up. As I'm sure you'll have the rankings by the time I get done here.
They are already at number 5. I already have the rankings. I'm just
number 10, Oklahoma beat Texas Tech 49-27, and with Baker Mayfield, he had another 4-touchdown, 1 interception, gave 283 yards. So he is positioning himself as a top 5 NFL pick game by game. Oklahoma State walked right behind Oklahoma with a 50-39 win over number 22 West Virginia, behind DJ King's 36 carries, 142 yards, and a touchdown. UCLA lost to Washington behind Jake Browning, 8 for 11, 98 yards, and an interception. Yeah, I go behind that. That's nice. Myles Gaskin for Washington carried the load with 27 carries, 169 yards, and a touchdown. Duke lost to number 13 Virginia Tech, 24-3. Josh Jackson with 13, 27, 200 yards, and a touchdown. Washington State lost to Arizona. This was a game of mid to late first-round quarterbacks. It was pretty nice game for Tyler Helinski, 45 of 61, 509 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, it's funny. People were saying West Virginia quarterback Will Grier is a first-round quarterback. It's like I saw his tape a few years ago, and I was like, this is the worst tape I've ever seen. This guy's making Ryan Leaf look like Chuck Norris. That's how awful this guy's tape is. And then he finally puts it together, and then he has a 4-interception game versus Oklahoma State. And now all the scouts are like, well, maybe Ransom was right about Will Grier being worse than Ryan Leaf. So, yeah. It's like Will Grier's off the radar now. And this is going to be interesting because Ohio State, they get road games against Iowa and Michigan. Unless one of those teams pulls off a road upset, you're looking at Ohio State being 11-1 with Wisconsin being 12-0 heading into the Big Ten championship game. You're probably looking at Alabama and Georgia being 12-0 as well. So you're not going to see much movement. This might be the most stagnant college football playoff in the history of the college football playoff, where we've always seen movement on a weekly basis once we get close to the playoff. But if Iowa does not shock Ohio State this weekend, this is going to be a year where it goes down as a year where we don't see movement in the playoff. We'll see movement in the top 10, top 15, but we won't see movement in the overall top 4. I don't think that's ever happened at this point, Joey. So this might be the year we see that.
Yeah, and here's the big thing going down right now. Michigan State lost to Northwestern, number 16 Michigan State, 39-31. South Florida, as you mentioned before, number 17 lost to Houston, 28-24. UCF, number 18, beat Austin Peay 73-33. So UCF is undefeated.
At number
just won by 40
country,
points over a previous 5-3 team. So they're going to be moving up.
They are number 18, I believe, heading into this week. They've moved up to number 15 in the coaches poll. And the teams ahead of them are Iowa State, Oklahoma State, TCU. That's why I'm thinking if Central Florida keeps winning, they'll make that push into the top 10 because the Big Ten teams ranked ahead of them will kill each other to the point where that'll help them move into the top 10. But I don't think their resume is as strong as a team like a Notre Dame or a Clemson or a Penn State or a Miami. What they need is they need Virginia Tech to win and then lose the ACC championship. They need Clemson to lose to Florida State. They need Penn State to lose another game. They need Oklahoma to lose, and they need the Big 12 to kill each other to the point where it's beyond repair. And even if all of that happens, the best they could do is probably number 6. If all of the breaks go their way, the highest Central Florida could move up is maybe number 6. But I don't think that would be enough because I think Notre Dame's probably going to win out now because unless they lose to Miami, and then they can move into the top 5. But even if that happened, I still feel like in that context, if we get a close ACC and if we get a close Big Ten and close SEC title game, I still feel like the committee would put Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Wisconsin in over an undefeated Central Florida team. Even if they got all the breaks and Notre Dame loses to Miami, Miami loses to Virginia Tech, all the teams in the Big 12 kill each other in terms of where they're ranked in the playoff, and Central Florida goes unbeaten. Even if this Central Florida team gets all the breaks, I still feel like the committee would screw them over in the end.
Yeah, and our last game is number 21 USC beating Arizona State 48-17. Sam Darnold barely threw for over 50%, 19 of 35, 266 yards and 3 touchdowns. Ronald Jones stole the show, 18 carries, 216 yards, 2 touchdowns for USC. So, Chris, what are the top 25 starting at 25 and going down to 1?
All right. there's two different top 25s. There's the AP top 25 and the coaches poll, but we're going to do with the AP poll. Screw the coaches poll. We're going to start with number 25, Washington State. They moved down 10 spots in the rankings this weekend, and they lost their second game of the year. I don't know who they lost to, but they're number 25. Number 24 is Michigan State. They lost this weekend to Northwestern, so they've dropped 8 spots in the polls. Arizona has made their debut in the top 25. They're 6-2. They beat UCLA. They've had some strong wins. Number 22 is Memphis. They moved up 2 spots. Mississippi State is 6-2. They weren't ranked last week. NC State lost this weekend to Notre Dame, so they've dropped from 14 to 20. They could still potentially win the ACC if they beat Clemson, which is another break that you have to be hoping for if you're a team like Central Florida. But NC State at 20. LSU moved up 4 spots with their win over the weekend. They play Alabama and 8 p.m. next Saturday. Stanford is number 18 in the country. They are at they're at number 18 right now. The scary thing is Alabama could lose to LSU next week, and if they won the SEC championship, they probably still make the playoff, especially if Georgia's unbeaten in number 1, because that would be enough for them, the committee, to say, you know what, this is a top 4 team due to their history, their track record, et cetera, et cetera. Stanford moved up 2 spots for beating Oregon State. USC moved up 4 spots as the media is kissing Sam Darnold's rear end once again. Auburn's moved up 3 spots to number 16. Central Florida has moved up from 18 to 15. And as I mentioned, even if all the breaks go this team's way, I feel like they're going to be left out. Even if everything happens, Clemson loses, Notre Dame loses again, Penn State loses again, Oklahoma loses again, Miami loses 1 game, TCU loses, the Big Ten teams knock each other out, Washington loses in the Pac-12. Even if this team goes unbeaten and all the breaks go their way, I'm not sure if they have enough to sneak into the playoff. But if a non-Power 5 team sneaks in, it's going to be this year, and it's going to be Central Florida. I'm selling them as the team that sneaks in right now, but they have a shot. They have a window of opportunity. Western Michigan was ranked 18th at this point last year. This team's already in the top 15. So if anything, this might be the team that sneaks in, and Scott Frost has done a very good job turning that team around. Iowa State made the biggest jump in the top 25. They moved up from 25 to 14 after their upset over TCU. Virginia Tech remains at 13 with a bye week. Washington remains at 13 with a bye week. I think they actually won, but my point, Oklahoma State beat West Virginia. They remain at number 11. TCU, they beat TCU lost to Iowa State. Yes, but I was saying TCU beat Oklahoma State in head-to-head play. That was what I was going to get at. So they remain in the top 10 because they beat Oklahoma State in head-to-head play. So they lost this weekend, which is the bottom line, but they remain ahead of Oklahoma State. Number 9 is the Miami Hurricanes. The selection committee doesn't want to respect what the Hurricanes have done this year, even though they've beaten some quality teams. They want to see what they do versus Virginia Tech and Blacksburg. They also want to see what the Hurricanes do versus Notre Dame. Now, if they win both of those games, Miami's going to have a very strong case to jump into the playoff picture at that point. Because if they beat Clemson in the ACC title, or if they beat Clemson, they beat Virginia Tech, and they beat Notre Dame, they're going to have enough of a resume to get into the top 4 at that point, because they'll look at the resume and they'll say, yeah, this is a top 4 team. And we'll probably get Alabama versus Miami.
For Iowa State, I want to go back just a second for you. It's Iowa State will be, I just posted on Twitter, thanks to ESPN staff writer Jake Trotter, stop opioids on the decals on the side of their helmets with the Iowa State, the outline of the state of Iowa. So to just put that up there, if you guys want to check it out, you can go to Draft Evolution on Twitter, and you'll be able to look at that. And I'm sure Jake Trotter from ESPN also has it on his Twitter feed. Stop opioids. As my best friend's a cop, so I can tell you, if you haven't been watching the news, you've been under a rock somewhere, huge issue. glad Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are going to be wearing these decals. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, not Iowa, Oklahoma.
Yeah, and those teams are number 8 and number 11 this weekend. I would imagine that the College Game Day crew is probably going to be in Oklahoma State this weekend because that's a huge game. Baker Mayfield, Mason Rudolph both have a chance to create that separation on draft boards as QB2 because Rosen's going to get the hype of QB1 heading into the process, but I don't know. I feel like Baker Mayfield doesn't even need to play in the Senior Bowl, and he'll still go in the first round. But the scouts who think his 6 foot are an issue are going to want him to play in the Senior Bowl and dock him if he doesn't. So it's a lose-lose for Baker if he doesn't play in the Senior Bowl.
Well, also, Charlie Campbell, I believe it was, saying that many scouts have a problem with Mayfield's footwork, saying it's atrocious. I wouldn't say it's atrocious. I think that Kaiser and Trubisky both had worse footwork than
Mason Rudolph's footwork is atrocious. Baker's footwork is light years better than Mason Rudolph's. And the media, the scouts, the Jeremiahs, the Matt Millers, they don't want to put Baker Mayfield in the first round of their mock drafts because it contradicts everything they said about Josh Allen. And there's a chance Josh Allen could still get a Senior Bowl invite and go round 1. That's why you're seeing teams play possum and mock drafts have Josh Allen ahead of Baker Mayfield. Because the people who scout these guys are running out of excuses for why Baker Mayfield isn't a first-round quarterback. So
not only that, but they're trying to shove down enthusiasm for him. That limits exposure. They want to analyze him. They want to see what's going on with him firsthand. And if they've got everybody else in there, it's going to be harder to get the angle you want to see him up close and personal.
I still think he's a first-round quarterback, and you're probably in agreement with me, but the media is – I feel like some people in the media are going to come up with these excuses for Baker Mayfield's footwork. I've seen this guy make 1-step, 3-step, 5-step, and 7-step throws on tape. So
the media have used every excuse to keep Baker Mayfield down that you can possibly imagine at this point.
And it's not working. I have proof he plays under center on Google Images. So if I see people say Baker can't play under center, I'm going to call them out and I'm going to echo bullshit because it's true. And we know it's true. We've watched the tape. We've studied this guy extensively, and we're ready to debunk the myths. But let's move on to number 7. Penn State. They lost to Ohio State. They were number 2. They've dropped 5 spots in the polls. They're still ahead of Oklahoma, a team that beat Ohio State, which I disagree with. I think Oklahoma should be ahead of them because of how they beat Ohio State, how Penn State lost to Ohio State. Head-to-head should matter in this situation. So I think Oklahoma should be at number 7. I won't say
remember, as Ohio State wins, Oklahoma will continue to move up, simply because they beat Ohio State, and that strength of schedule will continue to increase.
Yeah, if they keep winning games against Oklahoma State on the road, they beat TCU, they will move up to the point where they are in the consideration as a playoff team. And we may end up seeing Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Wisconsin. I mean, even if Wisconsin pushes Ohio State to double overtime in the Big Ten championship, if Oklahoma wins the Big 12, they will screw Wisconsin out of that final playoff berth. That's what will end up happening, especially if Baker Mayfield keeps playing at a high level. I mean, the media is trying to come up with all the excuses for Baker Mayfield, but unless he does something stupid again off the field, I don't see him falling out of the first round. I really don't. Number 5, Notre Dame, they're in the top 5 as well. Wisconsin is number 4. They're still unbeaten. I said that they would remain unbeaten heading into the Big Ten simply due to their strength of schedule and how not playing Ohio State or Penn State during the regular season is a huge advantage for the Wisconsin Badgers, and that's one thing keeping them in the hunt this year. So I think they're going to run the table and go 12-0, but probably lose the Big Ten championship to Ohio State. Ohio State has 2 tough road games against Iowa and Michigan, but if they win both of those games, they're going to be in the driver's seat to make the college football playoff. And then at number 1 and number 2, you have the SEC powerhouse teams, Alabama and Georgia, with Georgia at 2 and Alabama at 1. So basically, I don't think we're going to see any movement in the top 4 this year. until championship week if these teams, because all these teams have favorable schedules except for Ohio State. Georgia's already beaten Florida and Tennessee, so their schedule's favorable. Alabama plays LSU and Auburn, and unless one of those teams just comes in and beats Alabama to a pulp and pulls off a huge upset, I don't think we're going to see them fall in the polls. And even if Alabama falls out of the top 5, if they beat a number 1 unbeaten Georgia team in the SEC title, the committee will overlook their loss to LSU and they'll still get in the playoff. I think we both agree with that, Joey.
Indeed.
Alabama would have to literally lose to both Auburn and LSU to miss the playoff at this point. That's not happening.
It's not.
Because even if they lose this weekend, they could still make the playoff if they beat Georgia in the SEC title. And at that point, Georgia's strength of schedule would be too strong to keep them out of the playoff. And we get Georgia probably as a 3 seed, or Alabama as a 4 seed, or we get Alabama as a 3 seed and Georgia as a 4 seed.
Yeah.
Or something. The committee wants that. The committee wants 2 SEC teams in the playoff, but how can they go about it without making it blatantly obvious? Have Alabama lose a trap game and beat Georgia in the SEC title and make sure those are the final 2 seeds. And then we see the Big Ten winner and probably Oklahoma get the top 2 seeds. Because I could see that, Joey. I could see Baker Mayfield, Oklahoma getting the 1 seed. I could see Ohio State getting the 2 seed. And then I could see Alabama, if they lost to LSU, they beat Georgia in the SEC title. They get the 3 seed, setting up another Ohio State-Bama playoff game. And then we get the Oklahoma versus Georgia other playoff game. I could see that. I could honestly see that going down like that. Even if Georgia, because Georgia went 12-0 and lost the SEC championship.
Yeah, it's entirely possible, yes. So
this is going to be interesting because I don't think we're going to see any movement this year. But Ohio State and Alabama are probably the 2 teams in the most jeopardy because Georgia and Wisconsin are going to remain in the top 4 until championship week due to their schedules.
yeah, and that is that's possible. I think Ohio State more than Alabama, and
I don't think Alabama's going to lose either, but I'm just saying hypothetically if they lost to LSU or Auburn, they could still beat Georgia in the SEC title and get in. But Ohio State's probably the team with the biggest target on their back.
yeah, and not only that, but also if you look at it from a thing, because Ohio State lost to Oklahoma, then if Oklahoma continues to win and beats better teams, and Ohio State ends up losing again, that could force them out and Oklahoma into that slot.
Yeah, and Oklahoma State, and TCU all have one loss right now at the moment, and Oklahoma's next 2 games are against Oklahoma State and TCU. So if they beat those 2 teams in consecutive weeks, they're going to jump into this top 5 or top 3 conversation. And if they don't, maybe we'll see another team make that splash. But I don't know if they'll do enough to jump the 2 Big Ten or SEC teams. So this week, these next 2 weeks are going to reveal a lot about the overall state of the Big 12. And the only thing that can keep Baker from going round 1 is a letdown game in these next 2 games, or consecutive letdown games. I mean, that's how the media wants it, is like that's what's there. Baker's going to have multiple bad games, and then he's going to rebound at the end. I don't know. It's tough to say. This year is another crazy year. We don't have a lot of movement at the top, and we'll see. ESPN's going to unveil the college football playoff bracket Tuesday night at 7:30. So we'll see what the selection committee does, and we can speculate on that for future episodes on the Evolution Network starting next week.
Yeah, and next week's time will be tweeted out later this week due to scheduling conflicts. So stay tuned for that. And
thing I learned is I need to use Sierra whenever doing a Google Hangout because it's quicker and more efficient.
Well, I was just about to ask you if you had anything else before we went off the air. So I guess,
don't.
Aaron,
So I guess that's this week in a nutshell.
yeah. So I'm glad I was able to get on Lisa's good graces by picking Aaron Rodgers. And I hope that you're back next week because you picked Tom Brady over Aaron Rodgers, and there's no guarantee you'll ever come back from that. And for everyone else, this has been Joseph Potter of the Evolution Network, Chris Ransom of Draft Utopia.
Tight end rankings are coming this Sunday. We'll go over the tight ends on my podcast. So,
and that being said, take care and have fun.